Yes.
Yes, Pooja Arshnapally. She is the content repurposer, and she helps authors take their books and turn them into other types of content. She repurposes their content so that their books can live longer. Now, Pooja, um, the content repurposer, where did that come from?
Um, are you talking about the title itself or just the whole idea of it?
Both. Let's start with the title itself and then the idea of it.
Yeah, honestly, I think the content repurposer, I think for me, it took a while for me to get to that point, to create, but I wanted something that had like a ring to it, but it was easy to understand. Because I don't think repurposer is an actual word, but I know people understand what it means or has an idea if they have no idea who they have no idea what I do, they can at least have an understanding of what it means. But I think I started in like content repurposing when I started in social media originally, and I wanted to work with authors. So when I started working with authors, I realized that social media is only one part of how they market a book, and there's so many different avenues, and I just wanted to make a bigger impact. And so I was able to help these authors in other areas. So for example, I've helped an author. She used this book as mostly like a PR tool or a lead gen tool, and she wanted to use it for her retreat. So I helped her create a presentation and like a web, like basically teaching material to um, help her with that specific retreat. So she didn't have to like do all of the work herself, and the content was already there. So it's just kind of like reusing the same content and putting it into mediums that they're already utilizing. Because I know that when it comes to marketing for an author, it can be just really hard to figure out, like, it can be daunting because you think that, oh, I have to keep reinventing the wheel. And you really don't. You can just use
Yeah.
the book and use it in other areas.
Yeah, I like what you said in one of your podcast interviews that content repurposing is giving old ideas new life. And I think, like what you mentioned, that different people write books for different reasons. Like some people, it's like, oh, I have the story and I just have to get it out there. And for other people, it is like it's a means to an end, it's a way to market your other services or your events and things. So having all of that content in there and then trying to figure out how do I market this? So how do I get people interested in this thing? It's so easy to try to, like you said, reinvent the wheel and try to figure out different ways of um, getting people interested when you have all the content in your book anyway. Um, yeah. So how about the name? It's almost like you've created a whole new subcategory of social media writers where it's just specifically focused on, or social media managers that are just specifically focused on repurposing instead of like recreate or instead of like creating and curating content. Yeah, where did the name come from? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, I think, well, I just started with content repurposing because that was when I started working with these authors, that was the term that I thought of what I was doing because when it comes to like an author's like when they want to market your book or like you want someone to market your book, you're usually looking for the title book marketer. And what
Mm.
I was doing wasn't what a book marketer does. Like book marketer does book launches or those are the different types of terms that they use to market a book. Or they go like they book them onto podcasts and do things like that. Whereas I'm not necessarily doing that. I'm just reusing their content and putting it into different platforms. So it was kind of a new concept. So that's why I didn't want to label myself as um, something that was already there or a title that was already there because I felt like this was a little bit newer and I wanted to
Mm.
differentiate myself compared to other people, because I didn't want to be known as a bookmarker if those are the things that I really wasn't doing.
Yeah, like that is a really good way to like differentiate yourself and say exactly what it is that you're doing, and niching down, making sure that you're getting the people who want that specific service. In your podcast again, so your podcast is called The Content Repurposer, and it has like these lovely short episodes, like
Yeah.
less than 5 minutes. I saw that and I was like, this is so cool. So, first of all, before I get to the questions I want to ask, your podcast, what made you launch it? How long has that been going?
Actually this year, the reason why I wanted to launch it is I think for me, I wanted to start a podcast, but I didn't really know what to talk about. And last year I started doing a lot of public speaking, and I realized a lot of people really resonate with me explaining things. And that's something I could do. I'm really good at explaining things or making overcomplicated things simple for people to understand or to digest. And that's why I wanted to use a podcast to be able to just like focus on like one specific topic and just to talk about it in a simple way, or make things a lot more simplified through podcasting.
That's cool. That's good. And in one of your episodes, you mentioned um, words like inventory and cataloging, and it looks like you have this very systematized process of. It's almost like I was thinking about it in terms of like accounting and auditing, when it comes to content. Like, can you walk me through a bit of your process and your thinking and how you go about, uh, yeah, your process, how you go about doing that?
Yeah, so um I think I've gotten this question a lot when it comes to social media, because you're posting consistently like every day or every week. A lot of the objections is, what do I post? Or I can't think of that many ideas. And
Mm,
my reasoning is, you don't have to think that many ideas, because you can be repetitive. You just have to think, position it in a new way, but it's still the same content. Um, and how to do that is by getting a lot of content or a lot of ideas. I originally read Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, and he was talking about the concept of a morgue file. And it's just like a file that you just keep all of your ideas, like anything that pops in your mind. So if I have any inspiration from someone who I had a conversation with, if I walked somewhere and I thought of something, like it's just like a list of all the content. And it doesn't have to make sense right off the bat, but I'll use it for something. And so it's just like a huge like to-do list or a huge content bank of like ideas that I haven't used yet, but I know I can go back to it if I'm like running out of ideas and I don't really know where to start.
mm. So you start off by creating like a file of ideas and content, so that you can. It's. I like the word you use, like banking. It's like you're taking them and you're putting in a savings account for later.
Yeah.
That's kind of what how I would see that. I do something similar, where instead, but if I come up with an idea for a concept or something, I'll put it in my calendar. Like I have a special calendar just for my content planner, and then I'll just look at whatever day it's supposed to go on. Let's say it's like a behind the scenes idea, and I'll just put it in on the next available Monday where that's
Yeah.
supposed to go. But also like, because what I found is when I put them in the folder just collects dust. So it's like the same idea, but a different. It's the same destination, just a different like path for getting there, and kind of banking those ideas and writing them down. And like so, then you have your content, you have your ideas, you create the content. Tell me about like the inventory process and categories and cataloging. how do you go about how do you take inventory of a LinkedIn account or a podcast like archive, or YouTube thing? What advice would you give people who are like, what the heck is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So I would say like before you do anything, I usually tell people is like to start with your audience and understand what they need and like what are their like what they're struggling with. How does your service complement with what they need and how does it overcome what they need? And figure out from the content pieces that you've like collected, how does this integrate with those, like how does it complement and integrate with your audience? And just try to find ways that it can cross over. Um, and when it comes to like marketing, a lot of people like personal stories. They don't like being told what they want. It's more of like
Mm,
how it's framed or how it's messaged. So it doesn't have to be educational of them like listing a couple of ideas of how it can help. It doesn't have to be so literal. But it can be like a personal story or experience that you had that led them to making this type of decision. So I would say like still keep all the ideas, don't take them away just because it doesn't relate to your audience right off the bat, but just keep in mind when you do choose to use some of them, you should always have it in the back of your mind of like, how does this relate back to my audience? Or how does this help my audience?
okay. Um, that's good. That's a good point. Like keeping it back and bringing it back to like your main readers, your main target audience, and making sure that it all kind of aligns. And when it comes to like a book, like how do you ensure that the essence of a book, like let's say you're repurposing a book for someone, and would you make sure that the essence of the message in the book is brought through, like in the example you gave where you kind of made a presentation for um, one of your clients, like how do you make sure that those messages are still carried through in the different format?
Um, so I think one thing is like being able to talk with the author, because I usually try to ask the author for their input of like what they want or what main takeaway they want from the book into the different format. So usually that's my starting point. And then when I go through the book, I start highlighting and looking at different ideas that represent that overall theme that the author wants in their book. And then I try to preserve it as much as I can. And I think especially with when it comes to marketing, like it's just a lot of testing. So sometimes I could be like, it could not go my way. Like maybe one example that I used, I probably didn't think it would work, and like the author didn't think it would work, but it ended up working out. So
Mm.
I try to keep the core of what the author wants and what I see that reflects what the author wants. And then I try to integrate also other areas where I'm like, okay, maybe like we should just test these things out and see how this would be like how like the audience would respond to this. So we just have like different backup plans as well.
Mm. And what do you use to test ideas?
I usually use a lot of AI tools. So like I first read the book and like write out and highlight everything. And then I just go into AI and like try to um like I just go and like try to figure out like um different examples or try to get further of like how to expand these ideas. It's more just for like suggestions on how to do certain things, but overall I'm like the last decision of like whether or not I think this is a good suggestion for me to do or not. Um,
Mm. So you don't do like A/B testing on in like a piece of content or through like a Facebook ad or something like that. It's more using like AI tools and things when you're
yeah, I think
testing.
like for just like for a starting point, I think it depends on the medium because like for a retreat, you can only do it once. So it's kind of hard to do an A/B testing. For social media marketing, it's a little bit different or like I don't
Mm.
really do ads, but for social media marketing, you can just see by the comments how people engage with it. Are people like wanting to repost it, or are people following you based on that post? So like being able to figure out those specific like points or those type of metrics, then that usually indicates if someone is resonating with that specific post. And that's probably like the A/B testing that I could do. But I can only do that on a like if someone is wanting me to do a month by month
Mm.
testing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, that definitely makes sense. And then finally, one question that I'd like to ask all my guests. Pooja, what is something that brings you joy, that like sparks delight for you in as a content repurposer?
I think when someone like when I have an author who thinks outside the box, and because then or they themselves are creative them like creatives, it just makes the process so much easier because then you're also inspired by their book or their
Mm.
um their work. Also, another thing is if they're passionate and they like you can tell if someone is passionate about what they want to do or how they want to promote the book or what's in the book. Um, because then that also influences you on whether or not how much like motivation you want to like help the author as well.
Mm. Yeah, that's really cool. So thank you very much for coming here today and sharing a bit about what you do with me and with the listeners. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can just type in my name, or I go by the Content Repurposer on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you again next week. Bye.